Hope everyone's doing okay. This is a continuation of the Slaves of Satan series. I believe this is part 10. Last time I took a little bit of a detour to explain the corrupt and satanic teachings of Charles Taze Russell, who was a religious leader of the Jehovah Witnesses, but now I'm going to get back on the main track of going down the line of exposing all of the followers and accomplices that came directly under Crowley's teachings, who I did a full video on in part 8 of, which was specifically about aleister Crowley. But what's important is how many people he influenced to go do evil around the world and corrupt about half of the entire world. That's what's more important than the existence of the beast. And this time we're going to talk about how he was directly an in person teacher to the person who's considered the father of homosexuality in America, or how it should be referred to as the abomination of sodomy, or man lying with man. And there's more than one verse in the Bible that says this, and this is in the New Testament as well. But everybody should have to do their own research. So I'm only gonna read the main verse in case somebody does not know that this is in the Bible, because I imagine some younger people that might be watching this really might not think it's in the Bible. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman; it is an abomination. That's Leviticus 18, verse 22. And the word abomination is pretty much the equivalent of God finding the actor doing detestable, meaning that he finds it completely revolting and disgusting. And this is not an attack specifically on a male or a female that's committed homosexual acts. This is an attack on the act itself and the person who popularized the act. And there needs to be verbal attacks on the people that tried to make the acts look like it was popular or the cool thing to do, which specifically happened more with women than it did men. Because I remember about 10 years ago when I was a teenager in my mid-teens, it was pretty much every single girl in the neighborhood, and there was at least 30 or 40. I would say about 80% was bisexual, and that was just because that was the trendy thing to do back then. And most of them did not stick with it because it's just a trend. Most people's mind does not think like that unless they really are possessed by a demon or has a demon that's influencing their life and they're letting it influence it. But anyway, let's get on to why this person was so terrible. The first and most important thing that we can talk about, besides being a direct disciple of Aleister Crowley, was he actually played the organ at the O.T.O, at the Agape Lodge, which is one of the biggest Ordo Templientis lodges that there was at the time. And then people started to defend him, saying that he was only partially affiliated. He only played it part time because he was busy. That doesn't matter. If anybody knows anything about what the O.T.O is actually about, no sane or good person would enter that building. And for people that have not watched hardly any of my previous videos, let's just break down a little bit about what goes on in there. Demonic sex magic orgies, child sacrifice, murder, cannibalism, um, eating each other's bodily fluids, every disgusting thing that you can imagine. All right, now let's get more to what he did outside of being in someone else's organization. He started something called the Madison Society, and something that is still a continuing pattern for the 10th time in a row. And like I said, this is not like I'm intentionally just drawing names out of a hat until I can find some connection. This is how it is. I'll know enough about the person. I'll do a little bit of additional research, and then this will always come up. Rather he was a Freemason or not. Um, Not only was he involved with the O.T.O, which was originally a Freemasonic direct revival of the Bavarian Illuminati before Crowley set its Masonic roots. The Madison Society, one of the things that was based off of was studying Freemasonry. And while there's really no point in getting into exactly what they was about, because it was pretty much more of like a 5 degree secret society for homosexuals, people that wanted to sodomize with each other, but had no effect really on the outside world other than spreading, I guess what they would call a gospel of abominable sexual acts. But what what I always push that people need to understand and pay attention to is symbolism, because I believe it's the 1959 magazine from the Madison Society. You will see a lightning bolt, and a lightning bolt is one of the symbols that's associated with Satan, because in the Bible Jesus says, "Behold, I saw Lucifer fall from heaven like lightning." So then he also started another group, and this group was like a Wiccan, or I guess you could call a white witch Wicca society called the Radical Fairies, which was pretty much associated with Neoplatism, or Neopaganism. Sorry, Neoplatonism is something else. Neopaganism, which is all about worshiping the gods of the pagan old era, like the Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheon, the Egyptian pantheon. So things or the Celtic pantheon, the Norse pantheon. So for example, deities like Horus, Ra, Anubis, or Osun, Zeus, Apollo, Artemis, Diana, Freya, Loki. The list goes on and on. And in these, whatever they did, because one of the rules of Wicca that a lot still follow, um, that Gerald Gardner established, is to keep the majority of it secret. While the Alexandrian rite of Wicca, the Dionysian rite of Wicca, the Gardnerian rite of Wicca, or this homosexual act of Wicca, they're never going to tell you exactly what they do, what they did. but enough people came out to say that they regularly did something known as the ghost dance, which is rooted in ancient American Indian, or Native Indian, whatever you want it, whatever someone wants to call it, Native American culture of doing specific dances, chants, instruments, drumming to call up what they believed was their dead ancestors. But like I made very clear, and I made a whole video about this, that nobody nobody living in this world can speak to their dead ancestor. At best, they're speaking to a basic low level demon, and at the worst cases, they're speaking to high level fallen angels, with such as ascended masters, secret chiefs, the Astar Command, the Unknown Hierarchy, the Great White Brotherhood, the Mahatmas, the Masters, the Tibetans. It's pretty much an endless amount of all these weird different breeds of fallen angels. They people don't really know a whole lot about it, and then you get it further into it, and they could be communicating with the demonic gray, what people believe are aliens, but are the Nephilim in disguise, or rather it's the Greys, the Nordics, or the Draconians, or any of these shape-shifting creatures. It's all the same. No matter what, nobody can contact their dead relative. Because, see, this idea of the soul being eternal, it originally, well, as far as we can trace it back, came from Pythagoras, who created what we now know as modern math. Then it got passed down to Plato. Then it got passed down to Aristotle and all those other Greek philosophers. And that's one of the reasons. And most philosophers were atheists, but had this idea, or at least the Greek ones, they were atheists and had this idea that somehow the soul was eternal, and they would live on either either in the what's known as the second heaven, which is the realm that we can't see, or that they would reincarnate. And when you go to Vatican City, there's a gigantic painting of all the top Greek philosophers that was mostly inspired by Pythagoras and Plato. And there was also a lot of other allegations that the radical fairies group, or whatever, he never really specified if he wanted to call it society, a religion, a group, Wicca, whatever you want to call it. They were worshiping some ancient false god that's not one that's really specifically well known, called um Carnunculus. So while a lot of this covered up, if you look deep into this stuff enough, instead of scrolling on TikTok all day, you can see what these homosexuals was actually about, that pushed the gay movement, where you have men getting their dick chopped off and thinking it's the right thing to do, while you have these people that's in office wanting insurance to pay for it, or Medicaid to pay for it, or Medicare to pay for it. However, the funds are of getting your gender changed. And this goes much further back than Harry Hay. If this wasn't a series about one evil person after another, you can take it back all the way to the Kabbalah, of something called the Adam-Catamite doctrine, where they believe that Adam was originally a hermaphrodite, and they're trying to get back to what they believe is the original design of man, which was a man having both sexual organs. That's why they advocate for these type of people. It's not because these people in power actually like men. It's because their corrupt beliefs that mostly came from Crowley and the Kabbalah telling they have to. Just like there's certain commandment in the Holy Bible that a Christian doesn't completely understand, but they're starting to go on the side of the Lord, so they follow it. So do they do with their evil system of the Kabbalah, or the Corpus Hermeticum, or the Emerald Tablets, or Morals and Dogma, or any of these occult books that their gods or demigods wrote. Now, the one of the most disturbing things that I want to talk about, and don't believe these articles online saying that he stood against this organization. He started standing against it once he started to come down on him. So he started to make it seem like he was against it. There's a society well, I won't call it a society. There's an organization that is still around and government funded by this day, called NAMBLA, and it means North American Man Boy Love Association. And it's an organization that goal is to make it so a man or woman of any age is legally allowed to have sex with a child of any age, even a baby, and make it not a crime. Anyone that I've told about this group, and I've told many, has no idea that this even exists. But you can even find footage of these abominable pride parades of them holding up NAMBLA signs as far back as I've seen, like the 60s and 70s. This is a thing that's been around for a long time. And all this was started by Aleister Crowley. And we can also talk about someone that will be getting their own video that will probably be even more extensive than this. The man that's responsible for putting pornography, pornographic films into the palms of the hands of kids. And Harry Hay was associated with this man and helped him with his work. And it was a very wicked, demonic man who was another follower and someone obsessed with finding the sex diaries of Aleister Crowley, named Alfred Kinsey. And I would say he's one of the most wicked people of the last 100 years, that at least that we know of, that existed, as far as somebody that was a public figure. And also something I want to talk about, and this is something that's almost 100% in the occult, other than a few exceptions. These people will never be just straight up gay, straight up lesbian. They will always either be bisexual, pansexual, um, transgender, gender fluid, bigender, non-binary, and that's because it's more confusing than just being gay or lesbian. And don't get me wrong, it's evil to be either one. But the reason why there's this confusion of liking both genders is because the Bible makes it very clear that Satan is the author of confusion. So he won't let these people have a mind that's completely made up of what they want, of what they like the best. Even at one time Harry Hay was married to a woman. And he got married years after he started the gay rights activism. And he also participated in the Unitarian churches, which most people have probably at the very least seen a sign for. While they're not specifically a satanic church, as much as I'm against the Unitarian Church is existing. I'm not going to put false labels on it, organizations, churches, or people, but Unitarian churches do not have a solid doctrine. If you might have some that mix Christianity with witchcraft. You might have some that doesn't really have any belief system at all. You might have one that mixes Catholicism with Christianity and Buddhism. You might have one that mixes Santeria with Hinduism. You might have one that mixes Buddhism with witchcraft and Christianity, which is more confusing. He also got married in a Unitarian church. And he was also a cross dresser. Now, I want to make it very clear that as it's obvious by looking at me that I'm not on like the heavy masculine side of a man, despite primarily acting like one. I don't have really the visual attributes, but this is a big difference from being a cross dresser. I'll put a picture right up here of Harry Hay in his disgusting dress, but let's see what God has to say about the cross dressers. And a lot of people don't know about this verse, or most people do know about the verse about the homosexuals. They don't know about this one. Usually, unless if you're in the Pentecostal religion, people don't really talk about this verse. Deuteronomy 22:5. A woman shall not wear anything that pertains to a man, nor shall a man put on a woman's garment. For all who do so are an abomination to the Lord. So there you have that word again, abomination. It means detestable. The Lord is disgusted with it. He thinks it's nasty. And but I want to make it clear that while he thinks that these acts that these homosexuals are doing is completely disgusting in the Lord's sight, he does not hate you as a person, but he does hate what you're doing. He has he does have a deep anger for what you are doing, and unless it's somebody changing their life around, they will be completely judged for these abominable acts. If it's and if someone actually thinks that it's worth these men actually think that it's worth burning in the eternal lake of fire to get hit from behind or stick their manhood in another inside of another man, they need to be put in a mental asylum. And the same goes for a man that thinks that it's sex that he's taken in the wrong hole of a woman. They're in the same situation as as a homosexual. If they're having anal sex with their wife and they don't repent, they're burning in the lake of fire too. God is looking at you in complete disgust too. You got married to a woman for the reason of for the sexual part. You got married to that woman because she has the sexual anatomy of a woman that is made for sex, but yet you pervert it like you're having sex with a man. There is no difference. It's the same body part. Now, this disgusting, abominable act of what what people would call a man also is into union analyzation or analysis, which is the study of Carl Jung, and he's getting his on video too. Don't worry, because a lot of people are still fans of him, and he was pretty much the second person to start American psychology. The first being Sigmund Freud, then being Carl Jung, and American psychology has not been around very long, less than 200 years. That's not a long time if you really think about it. Now the problem with I want to make it clear I have nothing against the psychiatrist. If some people, unfortunately, because of the food or the vaccinations, thankfully I've not got a vaccine since I was a baby. I did not go to school, so I never got any of the middle school ones. I did not take the snake bite of the coronavirus. But anyways, that's a different topic. American psychology. What my problem is with it is not the medicine they prescribe, because some medications, if they do not hurt the body and do not completely change the brain chemistry, um I I'm completely fine with, and I would even advocate for. I would advocate for opiates to be taken daily instead of Tylenol, because Tylenol hurts the liver and roxycodone doesn't. In fact, we can talk about Oxycontin, we can talk about Dilaudid, we can talk about Opana, we can talk about any of them that does not have Tylenol in them, and as long as a doctor will give them to you, and as long as you do not use a needle to shoot them up, then you're not hurting your body. The doctors lie to you, the school system lies to you, the commercials lie to you. Um, they do not hurt you. Same with someone that can keep the Xanax or Klonopin or Valium or Ativan in control. They don't permanently change the brain chemistry. They just calm you down. But anyways, the problem with American psychiatry is in America, and what this mostly the western side of the world, they look at two things. They say, oh, something's wrong with his mind, or something is wrong with his body. They don't look at the spirit. They don't think maybe this could be a spiritual issue. Maybe this person is possessed. Maybe this person is inflicted with a demon, because what psychiatry should be doing is looking at all three possibilities. Now, I'm not saying it's usually to do with the demon when someone needs help mentally, but the point is, in a lot of cases, even if it's just 5% of cases, that's millions and millions and millions and millions of people. But anyways, the problem with Carl Jung is, while he always denied being an occultist, he would go to mediums, he would do seances, he dabbled with the Kundalini while looking into occult Indian practices such as yoga, such as Ayurveda, such as alternative medicine. And he created this thing called this term using psychiatry called archetypes. He believed that pretty much everybody was every person had one of 12 personalities, and the problem with that evil teaching is that it makes it so the person is no longer unique and made by God to be a completely unique being with a unique personality, a unique soul. That strips all that away and makes you not seem special, which leads to atheism. But I'll get on to him in a later video. Something that also needs to be mentioned is that he participated in the Gnostic masses, with which happens in pretty much two places: the Gnostic Catholic Church, which was started by Aleister Crowley and Theodore Russ primarily, and it also happens in the O.T.O. Now, I don't as far as I know, I don't think Harry Hay was involved with the Gnostic Catholic Church, but he was heavily involved with the O.T.O because he would be on as the member. He played the organ. Now, a lot of people just here don't know what Gnosticism even is, and that's way too much to get into right now, but it's basically an inversion of everything. So a Gnostic Mass is taking the Holy Communion of the wine, which is supposed to be non-alcoholic wine, or I guess if someone can obtain that, I guess organic grape juice would be okay, because back in those days when the Bible says wine, a lot of times it was actually referring to organic grape juice, because wine could mean several things back then, and I'm fully convinced, and there's evidence that I can go into, and I will eventually, that our Lord Jesus Christ never would have gave people alcohol, and there's proof about this. But anyways, the Gnostic Mass replaces the wine or blood, which is supposed to be represent the blood that Jesus Christ shed on the cross for us, and they replace that with one or two things: menstrual blood from the women in the O.T.O, which is primarily a sex cult and a secret society. Now, the other thing, the more disturbing thing that it is sometimes is blood from a child, because they're all into the adrenochrome and child sacrifice, and then the bread, which is the communion wafers, which is supposed to represent the body that was that was beat on the cross and nailed to the cross and whipped and died a horrendous death before he rose again for us. That's what the bread's supposed to represent it, and they go as far as to Aleister Crowley went as far as to make this so perverse that he made these things, and this still goes on to this day. I would say as many of these places as there are people that just aren't aware of it. It probably happens every day, multiple times a day. They have these things called cakes of light, which is the fecal matter of the different members of the church, and whoever is leading these Gnostic masses is responsible for making these cakes of light, which will have human feces, human urine, um, human regurgitation, everything disgusting and bad, and they'll make it into a little like communion wafer that you'll eat. So when you think that these gay activists are just wonderful people, know that this is what a lot of them partake in behind the scenes. And I'm not saying everyone does, but at least the ones that started this whole movement absolutely did. And there's more of them that I'll be doing a hit piece on at some point coming up. Now, he also had this idea of relationships called, which completely goes against the Bible. And while I'm talking about this, I'll open up the Bible verse to it. So, subject to subject consciousness is where there is no dominant person in the relationship. And nowadays, people are so just demented when it comes to a relationship. They don't think about the mental or spiritual part. All that they think about is the sexual part. Like, you'll always hear about somebody being the submissive one in bed or the dominant one in bed. Or you'll hear about um demonic things such as such as a BDSM or bondage or these whips or this other horrible stuff. And that's not what the Bible or people in the past that were more moral people was talking about. They was talking about the man being the head of the household, um, as far as making the important decisions, as far as being the protector of the family, being the provider when it came to money, being able to think rationally, because men are usually able to make decisions not only based solely off emotions, and that's a feminine aspect because these gay men, these homosexuals, they develop feminine attributes. So that's why they start having these weird thoughts that nobody should be the head of the relationship, that's to be equal. Just a second, please. Sorry, I think I passed it. Oh, sorry. I had to highlight it and then somehow it kind of went out of my viewpoint. Sorry about that. For man need ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. For man is not from the woman, but woman is the woman from man. For man created for the woman, but woman for the man. Nor is man created for the woman, but woman for the man. For this reason, the woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head, because of the angels. Nevertheless, is man independent of woman, nor woman independent of man, even in the Lord. For as woman came from a man, Even so, man also comes through woman, but all things come from God. That so what so what it means is that just the man was the leader of the household. It was never supposed to be sexual when it came to the dominance in the relationship. Um, and he also started this thing called Act Up at one point, and I don't know if it's still around or not, but Act Up was a group that pretty much wanted to try to find ways to give people a better life that contracted AIDS. And before I get into this, I know that there's ways to contract AIDS without being gay. I know you can get it through a dirty needle. I know you can get it through sex, basic regular sex with a woman. But instead of telling these people not to prevent themselves from getting AIDS, they were just trying to find ways to live good with it instead of repenting and not doing what caused the highest ratio of AIDS, which was by far um homosexuality or sodomy, which is anal sex. Instead of saying let's not do the thing that's causing the problem, he he just said let's try to make them live better with the problem. And he also pushed for something called a two-spirit tradition, and this dates back before Harry Hay. It's something that cultures have talked about for a long time, but at that point in time, it wasn't really a thing that was talked about until he started to revive the idea. And the idea is based upon that someone has two spirit personalities inside them. One is for social, everyday life, like going to a job, um, completing tasks, and then the second spirit is sexual, which completely goes against like even basic science. It goes against the Bible. It doesn't make any sense. It's the way these homosexuals are is they want to believe something just because it sounds good to them. And I think I've given a pretty decent amount of information. I think I'm gonna wrap this up. But I hope if nothing else, this at least gives you an understanding that the American gay movement came from the darkest depths of the occult, which is Aleister Crowley, and that these people that you think just wants equal rights are occultists in the shadows. But even if they'll never admit it on national TV, and these people above anything are after your little ones. Have a good rest of the night.